I'm from Vermont, and back in my early 20s, I lived about 25 minutes outside Burlington. At that time, I had recently broken up with my girlfriend of 2 years. It was a strange period in my life, the kind where you wander around, trying to figure things out, maybe searching for meaning without even realizing it. My grandmother was deeply spiritual and attended services at her local church every week. After my grandfather passed, I began going with her on Sundays, partly to support her, partly because I felt like I needed some grounding myself. My grandfather had been a decorated veteran, widely respected in our community, and his passing left a huge void in her life. Even in her grief, her faith didn't waver. She told me she believed he had finally found peace with God, and I could see how much comfort that gave her. I admired that kind of faith, genuine, unshakable, the kind that can bring real peace. One Sunday after the service, I noticed a girl I hadn't seen before. That was unusual because our church was fairly close-knit and everyone generally knew each other. She had dark, wavy hair and hazel eyes that seemed almost otherworldly. I waited for the service to end and introduced myself. Part of me was drawn to her. Part of me was just curious about someone new in town, especially someone around my age. Her name was Elise, and there was an immediate spark. She had a quiet, enigmatic charm, and I found myself captivated. I tried asking her about her family and past, but she would dodge with humor, teasing that I'd have to take her out for answers. I didn't mind. I enjoyed the banter. Eventually, she admitted her family had recently moved to the area and that she was attending college nearby, which explained why I'd never seen her before. By the time we parted, I had her number, and over the next week, we texted often and connected on social media. Scrolling through her accounts, I noticed she had very few followers. I liked that. It made everything feel more personal. She eventually shared a bit about her home life. Her stepfather was an alcoholic and emotionally abusive, and her biological father, she said, was far worse, though she didn't give details. They had moved to escape him, leaving everything they knew behind. I didn't want to pry, but I appreciated her openness. I waited to set a date, thinking I'd see her the next Sunday at church. Sure enough, she was there. After the service, I asked her out. She smiled and said yes immediately. Our first date was simple. Dinner and a movie, just a quiet night to talk and get to know each other. I thought it was going well. She was a good listener, genuinely interested. Afterward, I suggested a drive so we could keep talking in private. We headed out on a highway that in parts felt more like a two-lane country road, winding with trees lining each side. Everything was normal, beautiful even, until it wasn't. Out of nowhere, Elise started speaking rapidly in a language I didn't recognize, French maybe, or something similar. At first, I thought it was a joke, but then I noticed her eyes. They rolled back, leaving only the whites. I swerved slightly, nearly hitting the guardrail. I pulled over immediately, my heart pounding. She seemed entranced, almost like she was having a seizure. I fumbled for my phone, calling for an ambulance, trying to explain what was happening. Her head shook violently as she muttered in an unknown language. I didn't dare touch her, but felt compelled to do something. Then, as suddenly as it began, it ended. She blinked, eyes returning to normal, and gave me a wide-eyed expression I'll never forget. Before I could react, she threw open the door and ran into the nearby woods at full speed. I sat frozen, unable to comprehend what had just happened, until the authorities arrived. I told them every detail, even though it sounded insane. They took my statement seriously and promised to try to locate her. After that night, she was gone. I never saw her again. I checked the church, social media, even mutual friends. Nothing. It was like she had vanished from existence. Fast forward a couple of years. My family's old car, a 2010 Subaru, barely holding together. The brakes were soft, the engine temperamental, electronics failing. Worst of all, the windshield wipers barely worked. Driving in rain was almost impossible. One summer, I was driving solo to visit a friend in upstate New York. I loved long drives, so I made it an adventure. The trip there was smooth, the visit fun, and I began the return journey with the weather clear. As I crossed into Vermont, a sudden thunderstorm hit. Rain, lightning, the works. The wipers were useless, so I pulled off the highway into a safe spot in the woods, hoping to wait it out. Hours passed. I was alone, the storm unrelenting. Eventually, I noticed strange flashes in the distance, not lightning, but sharp white lights moving erratically, getting closer. I panicked, grabbing my phone and hiding behind a rock formation. The lights revealed 3 figures approaching my car, wielding flashlights in bizarre, almost erratic patterns. One even fired a gunshot into the sky. My heart raced, sweat pouring. I stayed frozen, terrified. Minutes felt like hours. Then, as suddenly as they arrived, they disappeared. I called 911, and eventually the police arrived. By the time they did, the figures were gone. The officer listened, seemingly unsurprised, and waited with me until the storm subsided. After that, I haven't done a long road trip alone since. These events, the mysterious girl, the highway terror, they have stayed with me. The fear, the uncertainty, the inexplicable experiences, they're burned into my memory. And though I've moved on physically, I don't think I'll ever truly shake them from my mind.
What I'm about to tell you is hands down the strangest thing that's ever happened to me. My name is Jenna, and a few months ago, my friend Alyssa and I were driving from Georgia back to Connecticut. We had spent a long weekend visiting friends from college, catching up, and just enjoying ourselves. It had been amazing, but eventually reality called and we had to head home. The plan was simple, a road trip, just the two of us, snacks in the car, playlists queued, and hours of uninterrupted conversation. Looking back, it probably would have been wiser to stay another night at our friend's place, but I insisted we leave. We were determined to make the entire trip in one shot. We drove through the night and well into the next morning. A few hours after sunrise, my back started stiffening from sitting in one position for so long. I mentioned to Alyssa that we should pull over somewhere, grab a bite, refill the tank, and stretch our legs. We passed several exits before deciding on one that claimed to be a quaint little tourist town. For the life of me, I can't remember the name of it now. From the road, it looked charming. Signs for local attractions, promises of artisanal shops and historic sites. But as we drove in, everything felt off. The streets were empty, the buildings looked tired and worn, like they hadn't seen proper maintenance in decades. It wasn't a typical ghost town vibe like you'd expect from abandoned mining towns or old western sets. There were signs of life, but something about the place made my stomach twist. You know the feeling. You can sense that something is wrong, even if you can't put your finger on it. Our first stop was a small general store tucked behind a strip of empty storefronts. We needed drinks, so we drove a little further in. Inside, it looked perfectly normal. The cashier was a woman in her early 30s, with dark auburn hair pulled back and tall, lean features. She had a quiet energy, almost elegant in the way she moved. I remember because she wore a scarf around her neck in a way I found unusual. I bought a soda while Alyssa searched for her favorite tea. She didn't find it and began to grumble. She's a bit dramatic, so I indulged her and suggested trying another store nearby. I wandered out with my purchase and followed her across the street. As soon as I stepped inside the second store, I froze. The woman behind the counter looked exactly like the first cashier. Same height, same face, same hair, even the same way she tilted her head when she smiled. I must have stared at her for a solid 10 seconds before forcing myself to speak. "Do you have a sister? A twin or something?" I asked. She looked at me like I'd just grown a second head. "No," she said slowly, eyes narrowing. "I'm an only child. Why do you ask?" I stumbled over my words, trying to explain that she looked exactly like the other cashier, but she didn't respond further. I felt a chill run down my spine. Alyssa hadn't noticed anything strange. She was still distracted looking for her tea. I tried to convince her, but eventually I let it go, knowing we had to keep moving. We left, but my gut told me we weren't done yet. We pulled into another gas station a few blocks away. The lot was empty, just our car, a small pump island, and a tiny building at the back where you paid. I thought it might be safer to fill up before continuing. Inside, Alyssa browsed as I waited at the counter. The place felt normal, quiet, nothing unusual. We paid, left, and the moment we stepped outside, everything had changed. The lot that had been empty seconds ago was now overflowing with cars. People were everywhere, milling about, filling pumps, walking around. It was a total rush hour scene. Everyone seemed to be looking at us, following our movements with their eyes. I grabbed Alyssa's arm, pointing to the sudden transformation. She froze, finally noticing the tension. "That's weird," she said. "Weird is putting it lightly," I muttered. We didn't stop for food after that. I just wanted to get back on the highway and put as much distance as possible between us in that town. Driving in silence for a while, we tried to shake off the feeling, but it wasn't going away. About 10 minutes later, a silver Honda Odyssey passed us. The windshield was spiderwebbed with cracks, the side dented, and it had a worn look that made it impossible to ignore. Alyssa laughed nervously, making some joke I barely registered. Then, 10 minutes later, the same minivan passed us again. Identical windshield cracks, identical scratches. We both knew it was impossible. We had been driving in a straight line at a decent speed. There was no way it could have gotten ahead of us. But there it was, staring at us from the road. Alyssa's voice shook as she whispered, "Oh my God, it's the same one." I gritted my teeth, pressing the accelerator. We had to leave that place behind. My heart was pounding, my palms sweaty, and the GPS showed that somehow we had been on this stretch of road for over an hour, though it felt like only a few minutes. I wanted to tell her about the time discrepancy, but I didn't think she could take it. The rest of the drive back to the highway was tense and quiet, each of us lost in our own thoughts. When we finally rejoined the main road, the bizarre nightmare seemed to end, and we made it home hours later. Even now, when I think back on that drive, it feels like waking from a strange, disjointed dream. I've told friends, and they usually look at me like I'm insane. I don't have any explanation, and honestly, I've stopped trying. Some things are just unexplainable, but the feeling in my gut,